right, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Artcraft Crowfall Q&A, where we take questions from you and we answer them. Only this time it's going to be a little different. We've got a lot to talk about today. So there's the card, as always, the card for March. We've got a lot to talk about today, so we're going to put the Q&A stuff actually to the end.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, you're J. Todd Coleman.
Yes, that's right. Okay, I'm J. Todd Coleman, Creative Director.
And I'm Thomas Blair, Design Director.
And we have a couple guest stars this time. Gordon and Ray are here. Tiggs is here. So we have some other people who will jump in as it makes sense.
Yeah, we've got the whole crew here. We've got a lot to talk about. I think where we should start is 6400, which is where we are currently on live, right? And the 6400 update, I think, has been one of our best received so far and one of our best releases.
Yeah, for sure. It's probably bigger and more impactful than anything we've done in the past, and we've had some big ones in the past. So
yeah, and definitely the game became so much more playable with 6400. So it was polishing a lot of things. I mean, and it's a lot of the little things that we're getting in now as we approach the end that it just makes the game feel better.
Yeah, for sure. We've also seen significant performance improvements in this version, right? We've had both on the client and on the server, which is cool. And we have some more of those coming. Like, there's more stuff in the pipes. We've had a lot of people asking us, like, what's on the horizon? What are you working on now? What's coming soon? And what's kind of the long-term vision? So I'm glad to finally be able to actually turn my attention to the long-term vision again. We really have been so focused on just getting the game done for the longest time that we haven't talked about this a lot. So we put together a series of slides. I kind of bucketed everything as, short-term things, medium-term things, and long-term things. The short-term things are things that I really would like to have for launch. I don't know that we're going to get all of them. We'll get some of them, but a few of them may not make it. But I'm working as hard as we can, and the team is working as hard as they can to try and get those things done either before launch or immediately after. The next one is kind of the medium term, and those are the things that I'd like to see us turn our attention to as soon as we have our launch legs underneath us. So kind of the first 6 months, 12 months kind of plan would be things in the short term, in the medium term. And then long term is stuff we do definitely want to get to, but it's more like long-term health of the game, long-term directions. I will say, first of all, this is not an exhaustive list. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we intend to do that is impactful and cool, but it didn't rise to the level of making it to this list. And this is also my list, right? There's a whole bunch of technical things that need to be done on the back end related to operations or tools or whatever. I didn't list any of that because that's kind of, again, inside baseball. Okay, so the first thing that we're all really, really focused on, you guys know, and it's always the top of the list, is optimization. We're continuing to work on that. We've seen some pretty significant improvements both on the client and the server. We had a great siege last week that was really busy and actually quite playable, though there were moments where the frame rate still dipped down. So we're definitely working on all that right now. Part of the problem with the gap in the castle walls that I mentioned is we're doing a massive optimization right now to castle walls internally, and to go back and fix that problem meant basically undoing all of that work, which would to be able to fix the problem, at which point we throw that fix away. And then when we come right back, redo all that work is now delayed. So I decided that I thought it was more important to continue pushing on the optimization, even if it means suffering through a small 4 or 5 day campaign that has weird and wonky walls. So hopefully you guys can see the wisdom in that. So optimization, I would say, is kind of number one on the list. Factories is another one that I put very, very high on the list. We're actually working on that in the background right now. So I've got some hopes for it that I didn't have previously because I realized that the priority is really, really up there. So we'll see where that falls, but we are working on it. It's not something we've forgotten. I think it's kind of a critical part to making the entire harvesting, crafting economy loop work. Tournament arena. So this is one that we actually haven't talked about in a long time. We haven't talked about really since Kickstarter. We had a Kickstarter goal for a tournament system, and we're going to spend a fair chunk of the time in this Q&A talking about this one. So I'll kind of punt this one to the latter half of the Q&A, but it's something that I feel like is pretty important, and we'll go through the reasons why I think it's important and how we're tackling it as well. And I've got guest star Rhea Shelley here to come in, since he's been kind of helping drive on this as well. Increased storage. This is a quality of life thing that we know you guys have needed for a while. We have public chests coming for the EKs in this next version, and we have more that we need. Right, we need vassal chests. We need all sorts of chests. It's a list of kind of a checkboxes of all the different checkboxes for each of the different permission types, and we are checking those off one by one. On the discipline front, we've got a round of balancing and curating that needs to come. So we're working on that. On the harvesting and crafting side, we put in kind of a shim for, when we took out passive training, we needed something in its place. So we put in a system that basically leveraged crafting to be our advancement system. I still don't like that. So we're taking a hard look at trying to move to the more long-term solution that we want, which is more similar to vessels, the vessel advancement system. It's just that requires some engineering help. We can't, the crafting solution was nice because we could do it all in design. Like, we didn't have to go back to engineers. The longer-term solution is going to require some engineering support. So it's on my list of things we're trying to get to. And then soul binding is actually just a thing that I mentioned because it's a part of that. Is one of the things that is common in other games is equipment that once I use it, it's now locked to either my character or my account, and other people can't use it. That's something we don't have support for right now, but it could be a part of that advancement mechanism. So I've got that on the list as something we're looking at. I will say that design still a little bit in flux.
Yeah, can I? Because I really want to reassure, because I know everyone's going to freak out about that, which is that's only for disciplines. And it's mainly because Todd and I don't like the fact that you basically sacrifice a discipline when you equip it, and then to upgrade it, you're actually in the hole because you can't use that one. So this is a discipline only thing that we're talking about. And it's mainly because right now to unequip a discipline, you destroy it. And we actually want you to be able to use those ones again, or maybe even upgrade them. But we don't want the economy messed up by people just being able to unequip it like regular equipment.
And if they do unequip it, we're also discussing there's one advantage of that, which is that you could then we could allow you to use that on a different character. So that you don't have to go through this. If you just have decided, I want to move from this character to this one, it gives you some ability to transfer that without having to start over every time. So anyway, this one is still being debated. But I wanted to bring it up because it is on my hot list of things that I'm nervous about not having an answer for launch. So I wanted to let you guys know that we recognize that there's a problem. It's a problem spot, and that we are putting a lot of focus and attention. Next one, handshake system for sieges. For those of you who aren't familiar with what this means, basically right now our sieging system is based on a schedule. So if you capture a location, there's a schedule, and that schedule determines when the siege is going to happen. Like, it's once a week or twice a week or whatever. Here's when the siege is going to happen, and you have no control over that. So what a handshake system does is kind of, there's two parts to it. One is the siege doesn't happen automatically. You have to actually have somebody come and plant a flag and say, I'm going to attack you, and the attack is going to happen tomorrow. And there's an investment required on that behalf. The other part of it is then you have some control over when that siege happens. So back in my Shadowbane days, the siege mechanic was somebody would come and plant the Bane Circle, and then you had that said it's going to happen tomorrow, but then the defender could adjust the time tomorrow within some gradient. They say, okay, well, then I'm going to decide, because I'm the defender, that it happens tomorrow at 6:00 p.m. So this is something that I would really like us to do. I may end up splitting it out into the two pieces separately and tackling them a little bit differently, especially if one of them is easier to get to than the other. They're kind of solving two different problems. The investment up front is so that I don't have to show up to potentially defend my keep every single time there's a siege window, not having any idea if I'm going to log in and get great PvP activity, or if I'm going to log in and it's going to be empty. That's the reason you have that upfront investment. The other one was just a convenience, which is, okay, well, you're going to tell me I have to show up tomorrow on Tuesday. Well, I get to pick when tomorrow. I get to pick. It's a bit of an advantage for the defenders. I get to decide when it's most appropriate for my team, because we're available to show up at 8:30 p.m. or whatever. So, anyway, I've got ideas for both of those. I may end up teasing them apart, but that is on my hot list of things to look at as soon as possible. The next one on the list is Shadow Rule Set. Frankly, we already have the ability to do this. The reason that we haven't is we didn't want to prop yet another world, because every time we prop another world, that takes your player database and your peak concurrency, how many people are online at peak time, and it divides it by the number of places that they can go. I mean, if we could show that with assurance that we prop that rule set and we get more people now showing up than we got before, then it's worth doing. I haven't necessarily felt that way yet about the Shadow, so I've just been waiting, but it is something that's in our pocket that we can kind of do whenever we want. The next one under that is import restrictions, equipment only. This is just something I'd like to get in because we don't have it right now, as an ability to say, in addition to import tokens on a campaign, I can only bring in items that they're equipable. This is basically so that people can't bring in a bunch of gold and a bunch of building materials into a campaign, so that everybody starts on a more level playing field. And then the last one on my hit list is Collector's Edition and Backer Rewards. We've got the Collector's Edition that is about to go to print with all of the various pieces, which is super cool. And then we've got a laundry list of Backer Rewards that are in various states of almost being completed and delivered. So, like, for example, the castle is in, but it doesn't have any vendor and chest slots. So there's little bit odds and ends that we need to fix to get all that done for the short term. So there you go. I apologize, by the way. This is just going to be a lot of me talking because that's the way the roadmap part works. So anyway, so that's kind of it for my short-term list. I did put a note in the upper right-hand corner that said not an exhaustive list because, like I said, there's a ton of other stuff that we have on our list. It's a mountain of work. It's just not currently something that I'm thinking about on a daily basis. So
yeah, I mean, we fixed thousands of bugs in a milestone and
right.
Lots of little things. And for example, one of the greatest quality of life things we added was the little loot widget that pops up whenever you loot something in 6400. It wasn't on anybody's list. It just kind of slipped under the radar. There's lots of little things like that.
Yeah, there's tons of little stuff like that that's happening kind of all the time. So. All right, medium-term list. So skin system. So the skin system is something that I definitely want us to have, and we do have some skins that we owe people as backer rewards. We've tried to kind of since we don't have the system in yet, we've tried to kind of hardwire around that, like with mount transmogrifications. That basically says, take this mount and make it look like this mount through the crafting system. That was a kind of poor man's version of the skin system. Unfortunately, that won't work with anything. It works with mounts because mounts are really not unique in terms of stats. They're the only difference between this Swift mount and this Swift mount is cosmetics. So we were able to rig up a recipe for each of those to do that. We can't do that with things that have stats. So eventually we need to have skins. And this is everything from mount skins and pet skins to item skins to effect skins to player skins, right? We actually have a whole bunch of really cool, interesting war tribe creatures now, like Iroquois and Urgu and satyrs, that would be fantastic to offer as player skins. We just don't actually have a system yet that allows us to do it. So there's both the cosmetic piece of make me look like this, but there's also the UI piece of I need to be able to go in and see which ones I've unlocked on my account and select the different ones. It's something that I would really like us to have. In fact, actually, from a business standpoint, it's a big one because it's something that can actually give us revenue, which we're going to need once we launch. But it unfortunately is just not core gameplay. And so it's secondary to the other stuff that is on the list. Stealth and tracking is another one, man. I've got a bunch of ideas of things I want to do for stealth that could be really cool. But unfortunately, we just don't have the runway to get it done. So I put it on my list of things that I want as soon as we can actually afford the time and attention to get over to it. Universal PvP leaderboard is another one. This ties actually into the tournament stuff that we're going to talk about later, but it's bigger than that because it also ties into campaigns. And so for that reason, it's not made it on my short-term list just because we don't have time. It is definitely on my mid-term list, which is, like I said, sometime in that 6 to 12 months after launch. And that may mean that one of these comes 2 months after launch, right? I'm not saying that they're all going to come a year later. I'm just saying that that's kind of the window. Caravan revamp. So this is one that we've been talking about internally, which is our pig system is It technically works, but I don't love it. It doesn't feel great to use. So we've got some ideas of things we might want to do to rework caravans. So I put that on the list here. We'll continue talking about it. Happy to have your feedback and see where that lands. I still really like the idea of caravans. I just feel like the one that we have in right now, while functional, it's not as fun as I would like it to be. I've got a handful of campaign things I'd like to do. Free building and dregs. Right now we have dedicated slots where it's like, well, this is where your Class A building can go. In the EK, we actually let you do deed placement. I would like to open that system up to get free building and dregs. It's something I've always wanted, always intended to get to, but it's very, very complicated. Technically, it's a very, very big ask. So that's why we decided that it was something we were not going to be able to get done by launch. But I want it as soon as we can after that. In general, I want to take a look at the overall building loop in the dregs. We don't have a great mechanism for drains on that. So we need to look at building decay. That siege weapons, to me, fall into the same category as caravans, where they technically work, but they don't feel great. So I would like to take another look at that. And then lastly is partial interactions. So that we've had a lot of questions about things like, how come you don't give me the ability to do territory control, where in order to take this thing, I first have to take this thing and I can basically grow my kingdom. I would love to do that. It requires a level of technical interaction that we don't have right now, which is locations in the game talking to each other. If we can put in an interaction system to allow them to do that, that opens us up to be able to look at features like that. So it's another thing I'd like to look at as soon as we can after launch. And then a whole bunch of stuff around items and vendors. And that includes everything from bags to procking items. Procking items are basically, weapons that either grant you a power or occasionally will trigger a power, which would be pretty cool. I think that would be a really great add for crafting. Being able to put in buy orders on my vendor in the EK, that would be great. Saying, hey, I'm interested in buying this, and people can come sell stuff to me when I'm offline. Overriding the currency on vendors would be great. We don't have that right now. Vendors all use gold. It would be really nice to be able to have a vendor that sells stuff for dust, or a vendor that sells stuff for whatever the currency. And extending that to the players would be cool as well, to the player vendors also. And then lastly, the vassal tax system. We have right now a maintenance that happens on basically a system tax that happens on your system vendors, or on your EK vendors, your kingdom vendors. We don't have any kind of system where I can actually go and say, Ray, you can drop, or Blair, you can drop a vendor in my parcel in my kingdom, but everything you sell, I'm going to take 10% off the top. We don't have that. I think that would be really cool. So anyway, so that's kind of on my vendor and item list. All right, so race and class expansions. Handful of things I'd like us to get over to in race and classes. Crossover weapon specialization. This is basically, I've never liked the fact that our classes are locked into a particular weapon style. The challenge is it is a tremendous amount of animation, and we have to go through and touch every power in the game to say, okay, well, I want to use this power, but I don't have a two-handed sword. How will this power work if I'm dual wielding? Or how will this weapon work if I'm using a wide grip two-handed weapon? So it's more important for the tank classes and then for damage dealers, and lastly for support. But it is important, and I would like to get to it. It's just what Blair calls the work. Right? There's not a lot of sexiness to it. It's a great output when it's done. When you actually have it and it works, it seems seamless and it feels great. It's a multiplier on the amount of animations that you need. So it's purely a cost consideration. It's something Blair can tell you I've wanted now since the beginning of the project, but it's always been out of reach. So
yeah, for years you've wanted it.
I've always wanted it. It's always bugged me about our game. And it actually is a holdover from the fact that originally our game used archetypes like a MOBA, and we made a decision to do the race class split, right? Where now I get to choose my race, I get to choose my class. I can't only play a Minotaur barbarian. So I think that would be really good, is adding that. I also, in general, feel like we need more equipment variety. Things like being able to dye and color my equipment would be great. Having items that I can only get because I have a particular discipline. Shadowbane had that, right? There was a blade weaver, I believe it was, that opened up the ability to use elven long blades. Having a witch hunter hat that I can only wear if I'm a witch hunter. Stuff like that would be really cool. We just haven't had time to do it. We have I can also, on my team, people know that I have a basic OCD issue with things not being symmetrical. And we have still 11 classes and 12 races. And God, that bugs me. It bugs me so much. So at some point, as soon as we can get to it, we know what that 12th class is going to be. I think we probably have talked about it in the past. I would like to get that in, but it's not something that we're going to get to immediately. And in spite of the fact that it bugs me, it's not even as high priority as some of the stuff that's on the short-term list. And then lastly, just expanding the list of available races and classes, right? And I do like to have combinations that, I don't want every race to have every class necessarily. I like that things are, there's a little bit more thought involved in it. But I think that we could expand on the list. And that's, again, it comes back to primarily animation support to be able to do that. So the next one I've got on the list is disciplines, expanding the disciplines and increasing the variability. I don't know if you can, Emily, if you can show Ray at all, but he's got some thoughts on this of stuff that they would like to do. So I thought it'd be good for him to kind of talk about the ideas, even though we're not going to get to them immediately. It's a system-wise, it's a foundation for us to be able to build a whole lot of really interesting stuff over time.
Yeah, I've always said that we wanted to expand the domains, right? The domains served, a lot of purposes when we first did them. But what it also did is it set a foundation for us to be able to expand sort of these subclasses, if you will. And so we've been going through and planning, taking a lot of people's suggestions. Like I said, I read all that stuff, make all these notes and write it down. We see areas that we can experiment in, like, there's some stamina stuff that, people may want to play in. We've got, damage conversions. There's all these things that we're playing around with and trying to come up with cool design ideas, new combinations, and really just sort of flesh out these domains. Everyone's like, hey, we'd like more in this domain or more in this domain. And we can do little things here and there about moving a disc around in the meantime. But in the background, we're planning a very large expansion of the discs that are available in each domain, because that's where you should really be able to get creative. And I know they feel a little tight. There's still choices. There's still things they're good, and you might do this or you might do that, and that's great. That to me was the bare minimum of where we needed to be. But as I've said before, and we've talked about before, we really want to expand that stuff. And so there's a lot of plans on, like, oh, this was a cool idea, we just didn't have time to do it, or oh, we need tech support to make this work and we don't have time for that right now. So, but we're planning, and we're sort of, getting excited about the possibilities of what we can do. So that's what's coming.
All right. So going back to the list then, thank you, Ray. So the other thing that I'd like to say for disciplines is something that I would love to do. It's just expensive, right? Is I'd love to also expand the variability of disciplines, right? I mean, it's one thing to go through and say, all right, let's create another discipline that's going to hand you, it's going to give you another dot and another buff another passive that gives you personal health modifier or whatever. I think it's more interesting to have some that are more varied in what they can do, right? Stuff like, hey, this is a werewolf. It gives me a shape-shifting ability, and I can shape-shift into a creature that now has natural attacks and a different power tray, right? Weapon styles that unlock new and different animation sets for weapons. Racial disciplines would be really cool. I mentioned the Elven Blade Weaver earlier. You can only get to it if you come at it from this particular direction racially, which I think would be kind of interesting. I think there's a lot that we could do in that area. And, things like being able to summon characters. And we had a whole host of really interesting, weird, very bizarre disciplines back on my first game. And so I'd really like to do more of that. It's just that, generally speaking, that stuff is all expensive because it's one of. So that's why we didn't have it in our first set to the degree that I would like. And I think it's an area that we could definitely grow into. The next one is rule sets. So this is one that we're still discussing, which is perpetual guild versus guild. I think that there might be a hole in our general world lineup right now that you guys are seeing currently, right? On the current build, there's not a dregs running. And so the challenge with that is that means that there's a hard cap on how far players can currently get in their personal progression, right? In terms of level, in terms of being able to harvest, which trickles down into being able to craft. In terms of vessels, there's just, you kind of hit a spot where until the next dregs comes up, you can be stuck. And I don't really like that. I would prefer us to have one. So I'm kind of imagining that just like we need the Shadow, which is a time limited 3 faction, we might want to have a perpetual guild versus guild that is basically one step in between the two in terms of risk and reward. So it's a guild versus guild world that does not go away. It doesn't offer the same level of rewards as a dregs, but it's not quite as dangerous as a dregs either because the stakes are not quite as high. I can see a reason for that, but just like the Shadow, and I think we could do it now. With the Shadow, we've actually tried it. With the Perpetual, we haven't. I think that the knobs would allow us to do it now. Again, I haven't done it because I didn't want to add yet another divisor on the number of players that are in the game right now, because in a PvP game, the other players are the content. So if you don't have other players around, you don't have any content. There's also guild alliance caps. There's some rules related to guilds and alliances that I would like to look at. I could imagine doing some campaigns where we set a max on the number of players on a team. It's hard to do that when you aren't running a ton of campaigns, because that basically is telling some people in a larger guild, hey, you can't come play here, or you can't play with your friends, and that really sucks. But once we have some mass and we actually have multiple campaigns running, I think this would be pretty cool to do. And there's a bunch of experimental rules that we technically could do. We just don't have the capacity. We haven't had the time. We talked about a long time ago doing a campaign where it's you basically have every time you die, you're out for the rest of the day. Like, you can't come back until the next day. That would be interesting. It'd be fun to try, right? It might be cool. It might suck. Playing with the looting rules, playing with group size, which we can do now, playing with friendly fire. I would like to do all of that. Like, we have built effectively a great experimental engine for creating new matches and worlds, and we haven't really now gotten to experiment with it. So we're finally at the point where I'm excited to be able to do that. That's more victory cards as well, right? We've got this ability to do victory cards and put them in to really change the flow of the game. Where they are now, they're almost more like group questing or guild quests. So I think we could really expand in that area a lot. It's a huge area for expansion. It's just something that we've kind of hit. I think we've kind of scratched the surface on what we can do.
Yeah.
The last one. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the victory cards one, because I think we shifted. Like, originally, if you remember, victory cards, they kind of encompassed all of the activities we had in Crowfall. And then we got some feedback that there were activities that people didn't want to do, so we cut those activities, like going out and harvesting a bazillion things or whatever. And then as part of 6400, which players haven't seen yet, in that dregs, the victory is now determined by campaign points and much less the victory cards.
Right,
victory cards are much more now about, we want to win as many victory cards as we can for activities we enjoy that give us rewards that are skewed towards that activity. So that means that we can start bringing back some of those other ones, because the overall winner of the campaign is determined by more of the conquest side of the house.
And that's the main thing that was really attractive to me about doing that, is it kind of loosened our ability to do more and varied victory cards, because at the end of the day, if you're not into one, you just don't do it. And it doesn't mean by doing it that you're folding your hand and saying, well, then I guess we won't win this campaign. Instead, now it's, hey, I get to choose whether or not I want to do this activity, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the rewards will get... Raymond and I have been brainstorming and coming up with newer rewards that fit each of the categories. And you see some of that, I think, from the 6300 rewards, where we put in a bunch of custom harvesting tools in there. They're really only useful for people who enjoy harvesting. So we'll try and get more of those out for more of the categories that reinforce that playstyle. So that is all coming, and that's content that the design team will build over time.
Yep. And then the last one on this list is UI customization. So this is one that I honestly would love to have had on the short-term list. It's just not possible, right? I mean, ultimately, it's going to be a huge amount of work to rewrite the underlying UI system to allow the kind of flexibility that we want to have. Like eventually, I would like players to be able to even do skins of the UI and actually expose it to the degree that other games have done. Usually other games don't have this at launch either, so it's not like we're alone in this one. But I do recognize that it's something that is a huge quality of life feature, so I would definitely like to get it. So I did put it on the list to look at as soon as we kind of have time to come up for air. So the longer term list, which I think the next slide jumps over to longer term, I'm not going to spend as much time going through that on a point by point basis because these are still very much in the ideation phase. This is more of I don't have a plan for it. I have a general thought that this is a cool area for us to go and explore. Things like a different additional biomes. We originally pictured our universe as being very much like Flash Gordon, right? The little floating islands, and they might be, and it's a bowl of Skittles is actually what we talked about, right? Is you spill out a bowl of Skittles and you've got red ones and green ones and yellow ones and orange ones. So you go to a world and it's a swamp world. You go to a jungle world. You go to a forest world. You go to a Feywood world. So I would like us to get to that. We kind of decided early on to put all of our concentration on one to get the core game working, but doing additional biomes and then adding architecture sets to that as well will make the universe really feel alive. So in the long term, it's definitely an area to get to. Another feature that we talked about early on and just never got to was animal and creature taming. And animal husbandry. I still think those would be cool. They're clearly not critical for us, so they are on the list. They didn't get dumped. We haven't really gotten around to thinking about it. I would put farming. It's not on the list, but I'd put kind of farming as the same. I'd put it at the same level of there's some interesting thoughts and gameplay that could come out of it, but it's not super pressing. New campaign types is just basically a nod to the fact that we intend to continue experimenting forever. And then lastly, I think there's a lot of stuff we can do with the gods, right? So we've started to do that some now with victory cards, and sacrifice, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we could do in terms of having the gods summon incarnations on the world or having the gods do large-scale god-style events that players can influence. I've got a bunch of really cool ideas there. Relics would be really cool too. I think it'd be cooler if the relics actually were more of an active role in the universe. I think actually this is something that Darkfall 2 did really well, where you would find a relic and your guy would actually have to carry it. It's above your head, or you're actually clearly walking around the world carrying it, and other people can kill you. You install it in your keep and you get a benefit, but other people can sneak in and take it. So I think that would be a really cool system for us to explore. But it's on my longer term. It's not on my short term list. And then we've also got this divine favor system already set up really for guilds. It would be interesting to explore potentially making more personal rewards. That could be daily. It could be weekly. I don't want it to feel like a task. I just want to have it be something that answers the question of, hey, I just logged in. I don't have a lot of time. What can I do that isn't necessarily a strategic level thing for my whole team, but feels meaningful for me? So anyway, that's some of the stuff that we're thinking about longer term. There may be another long-term slide behind this one, actually. I can't recall. Yeah, there is. Oh, yeah, the EK slide. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we'd like to do for EKs. And this, I put it on a separate long-term slide because it will play out over the long term. But that doesn't mean we're just going to pause and wait on all of it. It just means it'll trickle in kind of over time. We have some dedicated sort of resources just working on EKs. And so as they get stuff done, you'll see it coming online. I'd love to give monarchs the ability to set their import-export rules. I think that would be really cool. The tax system I mentioned earlier was a sales tax system. I think it would also be great to have a tax system on parcels and buildings, just a big general like property tax system. Breeding and farming is on this list. Adventure parcels would be cool. I'd love to be able to install a spider canyon in my EK so that people could come there and actually go and kill spiders. That'd be pretty cool. The building system needs a pass, just like siege weapons, in my opinion. Like it's in and it's functional, but man, I think it could definitely use a UI pass. Kingdom management is really clunky right now because it uses slash commands. So there's a host of UIs I'd like to see to add to that. Visibility. Okay, so visibility is about me and my EK, and how do I let other people know from the lobby to come visit mine? So we don't have a good way for doing that right now. We've got pretty rudimentary sorting and filtering. So we need to come up with a system that does a better job of letting people actively bring their kingdom to the knowledge of other players. Once we have architects and biomes, I'd love to support that in the EK2. I'd like to be able to have a desert world. Like, that would be really cool. Kingdom portals is the ability for me to tie my kingdom to other people's kingdoms. So if I have a kingdom and Blair has a kingdom, we can set up a portal, and it's basically a rune gate to connect our kingdoms. That would be really cool. And once we have that, of course, I'm going to now want the ability to go to war with Blair's kingdom, where I set up that portal or rune gate, and we both agree that it's going to be open for the next month or week or whatever. And during that time, it's full PvP and full destruction. Like, that would be really, really cool, but it's definitely a longer term thing. We didn't build a lot of those strategy level pieces and PvP pieces in the EK, so we'd have to bring that over. And frankly, it'd have to be changed quite a bit to make it work. But I do think it would be really cool. So I think that's it. I think that's actually the roadmap list. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of stuff that it was not exhaustive. This was me going through all my notes and pulling it together. I'm sure there's stuff I've forgotten or stuff that just didn't quite make the cut, because while it's impactful, it's not as impactful as the stuff on the list, or I might have just forgotten it. That's possible.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about some of this stuff for years, Todd. I mean,
for sure.
You really pulled out some of the stuff here from early days, like linking kingdoms and things like that.
For sure, definitely on the long term.
And remember, when we talk about short term, midterm, and long term, the short term is pre-launch and immediately around our launch window, right? Yep. Which is rapidly approaching, which is why we bucketed these things. Midterm is further out, and long term is much further out. Right. These are things that we've not forgotten about, things that we want to get to, and I think it's a great list.
So I will say that the medium term is important, though, because usually the pattern that we've seen is MMOs don't really come into their own at launch. That's just kind of the general model, right? Is MMOs spend the first year getting their legs underneath them, getting enough of a player community, listening to that player community, and that will start to focus the next round of things that you make. I mean, my last MMO that I worked on didn't really become huge until a year after launch, right? The first year was relatively quiet, and then a year in, we crossed the 1 million registered players line, and then from there it just really took off. But that's the model that we've seen, especially with PvP games, right? Albion was kind of small at the beginning and it picked up steam. Eve was relatively small at the beginning and picked up steam. So that's kind of the same model that I expect. So that medium term list is actually pretty critical, because that's, to me, is once we've got a baseline, now we start to actually put in some pieces that we've always wanted and we just never really had the time to get to. And I think that's where we start it starts to get even more exciting. So I'm excited. I'm excited to put the list together, frankly. Like I said, I've been thinking about what's right in front of us for so long that going back and looking through my old notes and being like, oh yeah, I still do really want to do that. That's cool. It's exciting. It's actually fun. It's nice to look up and see the horizon again. So
all right, so let's talk about what's coming next, immediately next. In fact, I don't remember if we talked about this at the last Q&A, but our previous model of building for 6 to 8 weeks and then putting them on test, we've compressed that down, starting with 6,500. In fact, we're anticipating a test server for 6,500 within the next few days. So we're shifting right from 6,400. Which, in fact, this would have been even earlier if it hadn't been for the Texas snowpocalypse, where we lost a week of everybody basically trying to survive rather than worrying about Crowfall. But test for 6,500 is coming up pretty quick, and we've got some cool things to show you.
So there are cool. Now, usually as a result of that, it means that there's going to be less in them, right? We're winnowing it down to things that are achievable within a quick period of time, but highly impactful. This one's a little weird because it actually does have something really big and significant in it. But that's not the norm, right? The norm is going to be, these are going to be smaller bite-sized chunks that are still impactful, but we're hoping to get that cadence down to weeks instead of months. That's just, and you're also going to see a lot more of our focus on bug fixing, optimization, and quality of life. And we're going to try and resist the urge to add big new things, because big new things actually just slow everything down. So that's why I've started to give you this idea of things coming and remind you, look, launch is when this game starts. It's not when this game is over, right? At least hopefully it's not. Hopefully we do a great job and it's when it really starts. So the first thing that is coming in 500 that is actually going to be big and impactful, I mentioned earlier, and that is the tournament mode. Are you ready to jump into that, Blair? Because there's a lot here. This is going to chew up we're already near the end, so we're going to
approaching. Yeah, we're approaching.
We're going to go over in time this time, so apologies for that, because there's just a lot. There's a lot to talk about. So okay, so we had a thing long ago in the Kickstarter. One of our stretch goals was tournament mode, right? And so I started to make notes of what I thought a tournament mode was, and as we did, it occurred to me that we might actually be able to kill multiple birds with a single stone here. So when I look at a tournament mode, the things that I think that in my mind kind of define what a tournament mode would be for us is obviously PvP focused. I want it to be a level playing field because that leads to more interesting games. In order to be a level playing field, it needs to have a static team size and a static level band. And I also really want new players to be able to participate in this. I don't want it to be the kind of thing where in order to participate in a tournament, you have to go and do X, Y, or Z. I want a new player to be able to jump right in. Now, that said, do I think a new player is going to win? Probably not. We have a very, very high skill ceiling, but it is possible. I wanted to have quick engagement and a maximum session length so I know what I'm getting into. I think it would be great if this thing was fun to watch. Like, there has been historically an issue with MMOs where, generally speaking, they aren't that fun to watch. PvP MMOs, I think, break that mold. I think they can be very fun to watch. And it's incredibly important to me that this thing allow for both pre-made teams, because I want to be able to play with my friends, but also to play up with pickup teams. Because again, for new players that are coming in who might not have a team, I want it to be accessible. The other piece that I thought this could actually serve, there's kind of two. One is we've had for a long time players asking for an arena. They've been saying, hey, we want a 3-on-3 or a 5-on-5 arena. And the other piece that to me was important was we have built a game that is incredibly cool and incredibly deep, but it also is daunting, right? So for somebody new coming to our game right now, they say, hey, this is really cool. It's a campaign mode. I think, I definitely want to play this. I think I can win. Okay, so what is that going to take? What's the kind of commitment that it takes for a new player right now to come in? Well, you got to get into a guild. And if you really want to compete, you got to compete with the other guilds. And that means you're going to have to devote a couple hours a night, a couple nights a week for the next 30 days to even have a chance. That's like minimum bar. That is a big ask for new players who aren't even sure if they're going to like this game or not. So to me, I wanted to have a bridge. I'll use the term, even though after I get off the phone, Debbie Sue's going to yell at me for using it. But I wanted a gateway drug. I wanted something that would give people a taste, an on-ramp into that experience where they could actually try out the PvP and get a feeling for it and enjoy it. And then hopefully from there, tie it into the main game in a way that it drives them to want to go participate in the other game. I mentioned earlier that PvP games, the other players are the content. So if I hear somebody say, hey, I ran around your world, there was nothing to do. What I actually hear is, hey, I ran around the world and I didn't run into other players. And that's a problem, right? So we need to feed the game. I need a constant way to feed the people into the game. And I need to get over that hump of it being such a big ask. So I think we found a way to solve this. And the people who kickstarted us originally and started our first playtest, we named it HungerDome again. Because as a nice wink to those players, it's not the same, but it's actually very similar in a lot of ways. So what we came up with is an arena that is not just 5-on-5. It's 5v5, v5, 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 I think. It's a 12-team match. And actually, Emily, can you bring Ray on the screen and then we can tell you which slides to pull up so that we can show you guys how this works? All right. So Ray, do you want to explain the map? Why don't we start with the map? Okay. Well, actually, let's start with the basics. So the teams are 5-man each, right?
Right.
And you got 12 teams coming in.
12 teams.
And then start with the map.
All right. So at least what we've got now is it's a circular map, and we have the 12 god statues along the edge. And each team starts at one of these statues. Now, you'll notice that little ring there. That is the hunger. And so the hunger will start to shrink over time, sort of driving you towards the center, right? Now, there are forts, keeps, and eventually a castle in the middle that players can capture. Now, a lot of games like this, of course, you die, you're out. But if you own a fort, a keep, or a castle, that gives you a place to respawn. So with this map, you can start to see how teams are progressing. Like, oh, this team has captured this one. You can either try and take it from them, or you go capture another one. Sort of give yourself a home base, if you will. I don't know how much more you want me to drop on. Just
no, I think it's fine. So let's talk about some of the key things that are important in this. So it leads to, we've played a lot of this. I mean, we've been playing it daily now since we got it up. And I will say, first of all, it is really fun. Like it's a blast. It is really fun. And we're terrible at it. Like
I'll lead any meeting I'm in to make sure I make the play.
Yeah, when the play test starts. So the thing that's interesting about it is a team is eliminated when their last player dies, right? And that could be death to the monsters. It could be death to the hunger. It could be death more likely because you've been eliminated. But that does mean that you have this really interesting musical chairs / dodgeball get out of jail mechanic going on, where it goes from 12 statues down to 8 forts, down to 4 keeps, down to 1 castle. And it plays out over 4 quarters or seasons. So you've got spring, summer, fall, winter. And so the fog is actually going to push you in to a smaller and smaller number of locations, which is basically forcing you to fight. So the players that come in at 30 at max level. So and you've got 2 options there. In fact, Emily, can you bring up the archetype of the team roster screen? When you come in, this is what I was talking about earlier with being able to be approachable to new players, like League, right? You actually have 2 options here. One is archetypes. So we have a rotating roster of characters that are 30th level characters that you can just pick one and go. So you just come in and you say, hey, this one looks cool. I want to pick it and go. Or you can choose any of your own characters that you've leveled up to 30 plus. So when I said that I wanted this thing to tie back to the MMO, I did. So clearly the players who really enjoy this and really dig this mode, you're going to be able to go in and actually say, yeah, I definitely want to play this Duelist Slayer, but I don't like the particular talent trees that were chosen or the disciplines that were chosen as part of the archetype, so I'm going to customize my character. The goal here was to let people get in easily. So we made sure to pick characters in the archetypes that were relatively straightforward to play. Like we didn't choose the ones that, if you don't know how to play them, you have a tendency to blow your own head off.
Yeah.
But you come in here, there is a grouping system that we've enabled for this at the lobby level called a murder of crows. So I can invite my buddies into that. And then when we join, any slots that are not filled by murder members, by my fellow teammates, will be filled randomly with randos. There's a matchmaking system on the front end, at which point then I'm assigned to one of the god statues, and we pop into the match. The match plays out over those 4 seasons, and it lasts at the most just over 30 minutes. So I say at the most because if you get eliminated early, then your team is out.
Right.
So what am I forgetting, Ray? There's so much interesting stuff related to HungerDome.
Well, I think the biggest questions right now, Todd, are around the characters going in there. Where do they come from? Does the stuff in there matter? Do they take that stuff out with them?
Yeah. So okay. Right. So that's actually a great point. So your equipment is not brought in with you. You come in naked. There is a game of running around the world, scavenging, killing monsters, and trying to get your equipment. But you have to balance that against your need to take a respawn. So if you decide to break immediately for a fort to try and take it to get the respawn, that's time that you're not spending gearing up. But the monsters die incredibly fast. The gear is really quick. There are chests located around the world that have stuff in them. It is a high-paced, high adrenaline match. It is run. From the moment you are in, I never find that I'm idle. Right, I'm constantly running.
Yeah, it's super, super fast paced. And the thing I'm also noticing is there are multiple viable strategies. Like you said, do you beeline it for a fort to try and get to that respawn point, or do you ignore it and try and gear up? Or maybe backcap somebody, or try and find a team that's spread out and try and eliminate them. There's a lot of different strategies.
Yeah, we've even seen teams split up at the beginning, which is kind of interesting, right? We've seen all sorts. We've seen teams that try. We've seen teams of people trying to use stealth, and we've seen people. I mean, it's all over the board. We haven't yet found a single winning strategy. I'm really excited to get you guys in though, because I think you probably will find some, and then we'll have to adjust. We have put a few restrictions on already in terms of what a team can be made of. We do not allow you to have more than 2 tanks. We do not allow you to have more than 2 support, and we do not let players repeat a promotion class. So those are our 3 restrictions right now, though we may change those. That's just where we're at right now. It's interesting because it is, in a large way, it's basically a super condensed version of Crowfall on steroids, right? And it does have persistence. But the characters that you bring in are cloned versions of your characters. So anything that happens to them there does not then reflect back onto the original character. So so that doesn't make any difference. It has archetypes like League of Legends and a symmetrical map like League of Legends, but it does have the fog and elimination like a Battle Royale. This is why I was jokingly calling it an MMOBA to Debbie Sue when she was asking me, what the hell is this thing? And I was like, well, it's a little bit of everything mixed together into a unique alchemy. The thing that's really interesting to me is that it works, right? Like it actually is really, really fun. And it's short. It's really, it gives a question to what happens if I just want to get in for a quick session. So I will say that there is a fear that some people will bring up of, well, what if people are always in this and they're not in the dregs, or they're not going to join the campaigns as a result. And that is a concern, but the goal of this is to increase the overall number of players dramatically, right? Frankly, we have to do that for launch. And this was part of our answer to do that, is how are we going to go and get a much, much larger group of players than just the community that we have right now. We love you guys and you're awesome, but we need more of you. And so this was our way of doing that, is it opens up opens up the game with an entry point that is super casual and super easy and super appealing, I think. And then from that, as people get into it, they're going to want to customize their character. They're going to. I already felt it. The second I got in, I was like, why the hell did you choose this, Ray? And he's like, that's what I put on the archetype. I'm like, well, I don't like it. He's like, well, then go make your own character.
Go make your own, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, and some of those points or questions real quick that I've seen in chat, you access this mode through the lobby. It's not
through the lobby.
If you're, and when we start testing this, we'll be flagging accounts, and only accounts who are flagged will be able to see the buttons to actually go in there. And the other big one is, as Todd pointed out, since it's a clone of your character and you don't keep anything in there, we kind of went nuts on the itemization in there. In fact, I created a bunch of items that aren't to be found in Crowfall proper, that are only HungerDome items, but it's cool stuff that I'm able to experiment with that I don't have to risk polluting the MMO with until we actually like it. So HungerDome is actually going to end up being a nice testing ground for some of these things. Like Todd had me throw together a permanent See Invis amulet, right? It's one of the rare ones in one of the chests, but it totally changed his gameplay, and he got incredibly excited about it.
Yeah, it was really cool.
In fact, it's one of the most excited times I've seen Todd about any of the itemization in our game was after playing a match and he got that thing. So you're going to see a lot of fun stuff in there, and it lets us just really go, you know what? After this match, these items don't have to persist, so we can go nutso on anything that we think about for stuff that's in there. I was like, even like, where's the mech suit? It's like, well, we can't put a mech suit in because it's fantasy, right?
No, but I like there's an amulet in there that is a feather fall. Basically, you can jump off of anything, no matter how high, and you don't take any damage. Like, it's just interesting, quirky, weird stuff like that makes the individual game more interesting. So one thing we should talk about is scoring. So the first round of scoring that we have for this thing, and this is why I wanted to talk about scoring, the universal scoring, which is something that's not on our launch plan. It's on the short-term plan, I think. I would love to get it in. I just don't know if we can. We do have, though, individual game scoring because that's necessary, right? We keep track of what your rank is, both of your team and your individual rank on completing each of these matches. And we do have an ELO score that we're going to track and we're going to use for matchmaking purposes because we want to actually have people able to go up and down. Longer term, we need to grow that. right now it's only HungerDome specific because we needed it for Hunger. It was kind of minimum viable for HungerDome is we need to put people in appropriate matches. Longer term, we need to actually extend that out to be a full leaderboard system with ranks. I want it for HungerDome and I want for the campaigns. Like we need to actually have a career progression or career profile, if you will. But it's not something that we had immediately. We just didn't have time. Well, actually, we've got that video too. Why don't you just play the video in the background and we can kind of continue chatting. It's just, and this is not meant to be a super glossy video. This is meant to be like, all right, grab me some B-roll footage so that while we're talking about this thing, people can kind of see what it looks like a little bit. So if we've got that, we can go ahead and play it. I think in that video at some point there is you do see a shot of the scoring. Now it's a mock-up, right? So all the data is faked out data. So that's the castle, the center with the vortex. There's the play button. That's the team roster where you can go in and select your character. And there's the archetypes. This is, you can see this is the map with all of the things. I mean, this version of the map, they were all claimed by a test faction. But you run around, you claim these locations. This part will all look very familiar to you. All through this map, we've scattered things like Chest and Stoneborn Ruins and Hungry Villages. And there's your scoreboard at the end where it shows the teams in rank, who they were eliminated by, how long they lasted, and then off to the right is the players on that team where they fell. And then at the end, towards the end of the map, the hunger actually slows down to buy you a little bit of time in this last kind of what we call the basketball court-sized arena, where it gets winnowed down to just the winning team.
Yeah, and I know there's some questions about the various levels, like from 30 to 35. Right now, you can play 35s, can play with 30s. There's a few things in game that will sort of close the gaps. Like Blair was talking about some of the itemization. There's some jewelry that will sort of help in some of those regards, give you some boost to stats and whatnot, including your caps to sort of help with that.
And the equipment also has been rebalanced a little bit. It's not quite as flat, so it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more of a curve on power escalation.
And so, and we often joke internally, like, hey, we've got some people who are, taking things pretty seriously and they're getting pretty good. And there's got groups of people who tend to win more than others. And because Crowfall does have a nice skill ceiling, right? It's pretty high. Anytime we start to feel good about ourselves, like, oh yeah, we're doing great. And we realize, we could be on decked out 35s and we could go up against a team of just bare bones 30s with our players, and they would
wipe us. Yeah, so that's the thing. Is there a numerical difference? There is, and we'll watch it, right? We'll watch to see how different it is. But I mean, ultimately, I want to tie this thing to the MMO. Like, I want people to feel like that they want to play the MMO as well. So I wanted there to be a slight advantage because I want people to go, hey, this is really cool. I want to play this more. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and jump into the campaign world because I want to create my own customized character. And then once they're there, I want them to go, you know what? I actually think it'd be really cool to go ahead and get that extra numerical advantage. And because they want to do that, now they've got to go into the dregs. And I just added another person to the dregs because in a PvP game, the other players are the content. That's by design. Like, I actually wanted that to happen. But I do think our skill ceiling is such that there's no guarantee that if you put me on a 35th level character and up against some of you guys on a 15th level character, frankly, I would get wiped. I mean, it's just, I think that our skill ceiling is going to let a lot of that wash out. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. Maybe yes, maybe no.
Definitely keep an eye on it. And, if you look at it from a statistical standpoint, for the most part, it's 200 to 250 is the change from 30 to 35, where you can get some of your core stats to 250. We have jewelry that will help. Like I said,
we have jewelry in the game that you can find in the world that will raise your it'll give you 25 or whatever points and increase your max
and increase your cap.
Yeah. And that was done so that we didn't like the idea of, hey, I'm an assassin, or I'm a slayer. I've already spiked my dex up to max, and now I find a dex ring and I'm like, oh, I don't really care about it because I wanted to get max. So that's why we had to adjust the caps as well. So anyway, I'm excited about this. I think it adds something really nice to our overall loop. I think my goal is for it to reinforce the MMO loop and be additive to it, and also give a really nice entry for new people to get in. And you guys have been asking now for an arena and tournament system. So, and we do have more of the tournament parts of the tournament system that we haven't talked about yet. We'll save that for another Q&A.
Nice.
All right. So how was that, Blair? It's the kind of thing where that's just a big info dump. What did we forget?
Lots of little edge case questions, but I mean, mainly balance concerns, things like that. Do I bring my disciplines into my character? Are the talents already spent? Yeah, it is a clone of the character.
The clone of your character. Only without the equipment. You start with crappy newbie equipment, actually. The same stuff that you start a brand new character with. So you don't come in and have to run around and punch things. And this, I will say, is a shortcutted this entire session. Like, we tried originally to say, like, okay, how much do we include harvesting and crafting and stuff like that? And the answer is this session is just too fast. So this particular session is not for harvesting and crafting. We looked at it and it just didn't make sense. It is a full-on PvP match. That's the goal of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very exciting for the like. I heard this was a PvP game, but I have to do all this MMO stuff first to get to that. This is just the great shortcut to seeing what the combat is in the game and end game combat right off the bat. Right
off the bat. And if they don't like it, then they don't like it. And I almost expect that when we haven't tested this yet, but what we'll end up doing is pretty soon here we'll do another round of invites. I think the next one is 12.2. So when those, and I really would like to get this, at least get Dregs up before we do those invites, if not HungerDome on to test. But I'd like to get people in, and I'd like to try out putting people in through two different new player experiences. One where we put them into the current NPE, the new player experience, and the other where we actually just say, all right, well, here's HungerDome. Here's a quick video that is a 30-second version of what we just explained to you. Go and see how they both track, or maybe allow people to choose. Say, hey, are you ready for the MMO? If you are, go through door number 1. And if you're not, and you just want to jump immediately into the fight, go through door number 2. I think that would be interesting too. So there's some trial stuff there.
Yeah, that very much reminds me of, you see this a lot in console games where they make you the most powerful character. They make you the end game character for like a 3-minute intro, and then they set you all back to 0. Just so you can see where the game is going to end up, but they show it to you immediately, and then they just set you back to 0. But for us, it's going to be getting into one of our most important, if not the most important element of the game, which is our combat, right? You get to see it in its all full glory right off the bat, which is super exciting in many ways.
Only abbreviated. Everything was like, drill it down to the core, and if it's not absolutely necessary, it's gone, because we need to get it squeezed down into the essence. Like the dark crystal. It's the essence of Crowfall. We use the big crystal to scout the essence. So I think it's pretty cool.
All right. So you ready to start talking about the rest of 6500? Because we're out of time.
Okay. All right, Blair, what do we have to go through?
Okay, so we came up with a plan for the factories. It is something that Todd and I hashed out over a couple weeks. We pulled in a couple engineers. It is something that we are going to start implementing.
Yeah, we're making a run for that one. That one we're trying to get in.
Right. So it's a way to take basically an item like a sword, put it into a thing, and clone that thing multiple times for a different cost potentially of the end item. It would be a great way to quickly gear up a guild or whatever.
Yeah, so the key there, so let's real quick, we'll hit on it because I know it's just adding a bunch of questions. So the idea is I have a sword that I actually did experiment on. I feed it into this thing as a parent object. I then have to put a whole bunch of I have to put the resources in that it would take. If I want to make 5 of them, I have to put in the metal bars necessary to make 5 of them, but I don't do the experimentation again. And when I hit run, they all produce a copy of that. Copies cannot be copied back into the machine, and the original takes a durability hit. So that over time, as I'm using this thing, I'm chewing up durability, so I can't make infinite copies. But it should dramatically shortcut the pain associated with crafting. You basically spend your time on experimentation once, and then when you get something you like, you can now repeat it. So I think that'll be a pretty cool addition. We're looking at discipline advancement. I mentioned that one. Loot protection. That's one that came up. So I did put in an order for us to change the loot protection on dregs so that you have a drop rate. I can't remember where we set it to, but it's something like 50%. So even if you have those harvesting runestones that protect your particular narrow band of items related to what you do and have invested in, on dregs, that protection is less in accordance with our idea of higher risk, higher reward. So that's coming in this next version. I mentioned that we redid all the castle walls and keep walls, so that's a big performance optimization that should be coming in this next version, especially where it matters, which is in big fights. Go ahead.
We got the EKs and buildings. We added another kind of chest for the EK that's been worked on. The more public chest.
One. I don't think we have the vassal one in yet, but it is on the list. So again, the dedicated EK resources, we'll get to it when they get to it.
One of the nicer, prettier features is we actually have the name frames all hooked up. If Emily
right. I forgot about that one. Yep.
If Emily could show us that sheet, you can now, based on which name frames you're eligible for, in your settings option, there's name frame selection, and let's see, is it up there? Yep. So it totally makes everything cool. If you'll notice, there's a little 16 and a K, and there'll be a 17. It denotes what year you joined us as a backer. And thank everybody for backing us, of course, over the course of this project. Wouldn't be here without you. So that piece is fixed. The rest of the frame you can customize to any of the ones that you are eligible to. They look great.
That reminds me of some grouping UI changes that are coming in this version as well. So now on your grouping UI, we've added a little symbol next to each player that shows the race and the class of that player. And we are putting a symbol and a color on each of those so that on your compass now, if you're looking for not just any team member, you're looking for Bob, you know that Bob is this color in the symbol. You can look on your compass and see them. So we've got some general compass improvements. And we do also have one that I don't think it's in this version, but will be in the next one after that, which is to circumvent trading. If you don't want to have to go through the whole trading thing, if you just want to literally give an object to another player in your group, you can drag the item and drop it directly on their name in the group HUD, and it just gives it to them. And then that little widget that we have now that says when you pick up an item, on their screen will show up, Todd gave you a thing. And so I think that's another, we're starting to get some of these quality of life things in that I think are really, really super nice. So just another example that you happen to bump into in my head because you mentioned the new frames. So
it's like, oh, and you're going to get the one right after it, which is also where we've got a crafting UI enhancement. I've talked about this in the past. We actually pulled the trigger. It's not going to be ready for 6500. We're going to push that into the next one. I want to give it a little more polish than what we've got. I do want to show you where we're going with it, though, because there has been effort put into it, and I've been promising this one for a long time, but it is going to be the update after this. So this is, you guys know this screen, and you're well familiar with this. This was the original update to the old style UI.
So this is now that's one of the oldest UIs in the game, right?
Right. So now I think this is the last of the old style UIs being pulled out. And in this case, you can see it has this, it's the same game. We've kind of optimized it all onto one screen. You can rename on this screen. We've gotten rid of the screen after this one. And then if you go to the next one, where you've actually got your results. And now the cool thing is the results are color coded. So you can tell which one, this is the selection screen. One more, please. There you go. So you see the colors. We used the standard legendary, epic, rare, uncommon, common color scheme to match up with the amazing, greats, and successes. So you know which ones are going to re-roll should you choose to re-roll or polish the item. Yeah, it definitely makes the process
another
better.
Nice little quality of life thing you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner is the name, right? So now on this screen, if you want to rename it, you do it here. So by doing that, we now can remove the subsequent screen that has the take button on it. I think it's gone, as of this update, will be gone in every scenario, correct?
Yeah, you'll be able to, that end screen just gets bypassed pretty much, the old one, because you can do it all here. So that's one less screen, so it makes the process even more streamlined. And then, but that's sadly we had to push that out of 6500. I am a sad panda. We are
that doesn't mean you'll be waiting forever now, right? We're on this much faster iteration cycle now, so getting pushed out one milestone is not what it used to be. So
and then we've got some Kickstarter stuff coming in this one. So this was kind of fun. We got to actually try. Remember the original Kickstarter creation of reward process, Todd, where we were just like, yeah, let's give them a statue that does something with the food. Or
because we didn't know what those systems were at the time. So
it was 5 years ago, and you're like, yeah, we're going to have that someday. So now we're actually putting buffs and powers on these things that are applicable to you guys. So in this case, we've got some of these relics. The very first one is that Stoneborn one, which looks pretty badass. And it's going to turn off decay in the EK. So we know you guys like to skirmish in the EKs. So having
decay on death, right? It turns off death decay.
Yep, the death decay. So you can skirmish all you want, and it will shut off death decay. And it looks pretty sweet, and everyone's going to want one of these suckers in their EK. We've also got one that turns off hunger in the EK. And what else do we have? Oh, there was the Centaur one, which increased movement speed in the EK. So a lot of the things that just would make it nicer to move around, do whatever you're going to do in the EK, we're putting those things in for all of these old rewards. I think we even did some telethon rewards back. You remember those? So we're now actually
for sure. Those are So we've got a giant laundry list of, hey, now we need to actually get all the things done. And there were two of them, in fact. There was one which was what are all the digital rewards that we've ever promised. We need to go through them and make sure that they are in the game and the functionality works and they actually are in the right bundles on the web and you can import them. Like it's a pretty good amount of work actually just in auditing that stuff. And then we had to do the same thing on the collector's edition, right? The collector's edition had all the miniatures in it. It had the art book. It had a thumb drive. Like it has a bunch of cool stuff in it that we had to go through and kind of each one of those has its own separate manufacturing line. And then we have to pull it all together and get those shipped. So Debbie Sue and the marketing group took over that process. And I'm really happy with the result. I think it turned out great. I think the people who jumped in at the beginning and picked up the collector's edition are going to be very, very happy. And it comes also with a couple buddy codes that you can use literally to give a copy of the game to friends, which is really cool as well.
And the next one, which is one that goes back to some of our original concept art, which is the EK crafting station of the Forge with the Stoneborn Thrall. And if you remember that old concept piece with the Thrall work in the Forge, we actually got a pretty good Thrall in there. We still need to give it whatever buff it's going to give, because again, we're trying to keep the EK stuff in line with the campaigns, but we just wanted to make it look good. And I think Trevor did a bang up job of attaching that guy. We'll get some animations on him at some point. The station will provide a buff, and it will be one more cool thing to put in your EK. So some of these older rewards, we just got designers working on the older rewards, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so the other thing that's coming in 6500 is we've got some more performance optimization. I actually saw the fade in, fade out tech last night, which is so much better for when assets come into range on your view instead of them just popping in or popping out, right? Because we're cleaning them out. The fade in, fade out is just, it's so funny. It's all these little things that you need to make the game look good today compared to
actually, so speaking of which, there's another one that we should hit before we get off, but that's dodges, charged powers, right?
Yeah,
we finally got
I was going to that one, Todd.
Okay, yeah, definitely, because that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one, and I've got a story about that one too. The final thing that's coming in is this game guide for the web. We're building
it's not the final thing, dude. There's so much more that I'm just sitting remembering things, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's in there too. There's a lot. But final thing you want to talk about?
We're trying to get you guys some more web assets for the characters, the general overview of the worlds, the God, the bestiaries. It should be useful for everybody. And we're going to start with it in 6500, and it's going to come out in phases over the next couple months. So And Todd just brought up one of my questions, which since we're just going to skip the questions, I do want to answer this one, which is why does my charge let me use it twice and sometimes take a long cooldown? This is because when we built the dodge pip system, we used the resource system, which ticks at a server rate, and you could get lucky and use a resource and instantly get a regen.
Explain what that means. So by resource system, it means that what's actually happening under the covers is it's a pool, right? Like stamina.
Yep.
And so you're actually, what's happening is you're depleting the pool and then refilling the pool. And so because of that, due to the vagaries of server tick rates, depending on when you happen to use this thing, you might use it right before the tick rate and you get it back. Like that was just kind of a bizarre, well, it's because we didn't have the feature done, so we couldn't do it the right way. So we used what we had under the covers.
Right. And I mean, typically you don't really notice this when you're playing because health and stamina regenerate every 1 second. So if something happens on the time period of 1 second, it's not something you really know, oh, I got an extra health tick, right? It doesn't really matter. However, dodge, of which some races only have one, you would notice if it had instantly regenerated, right? So we've finally got this ticket that I had submitted. Probably it was 2 years ago when I look at the ticket date. It's always exciting to get these really old legacy things. I'm like, man, this is a problem. We need to solve it. I'll put a ticket in the system and we'll get to it. And someday that ticket comes and you're like, oh my God, we're finally doing that. And this one happened to be a 2-year-old ticket, which is for a way to say a power can have a number of charges. So basically in 6500, you're going to notice in the lower right corner, we now have the ability to say you can use this power back to back, and then it will have an individual cooldown on that power. So dodges are the first power group that is getting converted over to this. So you will notice now that dodge, if you have 2 of them, it'll have a little 2, and you can use it back to back, and then the slot will cool down, and then it will cool down again, and you'll get your 2 charges back. This gets rid of that whole reliance on the resource system, which means we shouldn't have anybody who gets these free 20-meter bonus dodges every so often, which makes them impossible to catch. So I'm really excited for this one. I love it when old tickets finally come in, and then we're able to make the game better for it. It is going to change combat a little bit in that you won't have people randomly getting away and getting 40 meters out of a 20-meter dodge, which is pretty cool.
All right, okay. So I think, do we have more, or are we going to call it? We're over half an hour over our normal time.
Yeah, let's just go and show the backer reward for March.
Okay.
Because, right, as always, we appreciate you for backing. The March Crow reward is the Shadow Spider Mount and Belt Totem.
Yeah, reminder, these are things we're just, if you are a buyer from any time from Kickstarter till now, we're just giving you this because thank you. Thank you for having faith in our team and backing us. We're not trying to sell this to you. We're just saying that every month we like to do it as an appreciation thing. And so this is the one for this month.
Yeah, I love this spider. I mean, the black spider with the red eyes.
It's really cool. And the potion bottles actually, like the liquid inside the potion bottles as he's moving around, like actually slosh around. It's a great mount.
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite mounts so far that we've built. I love the spider, and the color scheme is awesome. I can't wait to see it in game, and you will get it as long as you're a backer. So that is fantastic.
And thank you again for being a backer.
Yes, we always appreciate our backers. And again, all the feedback you guys give us, always leave it on the forums. Somebody will read it. And yeah, we are so far over time. We are not going to do the rest of the questions.
We're trying to get 500 up to test imminently. We're working on it now. There are pieces of HungerDome in there. They're not yet quite ready. Technically, the map actually works, but the problem is matchmaking is just coming in hot right now. So at some point after 500 hits test, then we will enable HungerDome. We will likely go ahead and give you guys warning. My guess is we've been doing HungerDome tests now on a daily basis. We have a set hour where we invite the whole team to come in, and whenever we have a bug that causes it to not work, the team gets really pissed at us, actually, which is a great sign. But so we will probably start by doing that. Is we'll pick a particular time and say, hey, this Thursday and we'll vary it up so that we can get better coverage between EU and US. But this Thursday we're going to do a test, and the test is going to be at 10 in the morning or at 6 at night Central or whatever. We'll pick some times and we'll let everybody come in and we'll let you guys play, and then we'll take it back down so we can go make changes, and then we'll do it again. And then eventually being not that far from now, we want to just bring it up to where it's available all the time. You can get in, you can click play, or you can join a murder, invite your friends in, click play, and then select your characters, and then you're off to the races. So that's the general order of events for 6.500.
There you go. And that's a good summary. And I think we should close it out on that because, again, we are 30 minutes over.
We are 30 minutes over, and I've got some bugs to go take a look at. So
I
cool.
want to thank everybody for...
Yeah, thank you guys as always, for coming in. I can't believe you stuck around so long. So thank you again for continuing to be patient as we go through these birthing pains. It is definitely getting exciting. I can feel the excitement now among the team. My guess is that as you guys see the stuff that we're cooking up, that'll start to flow out to you as well. Those of you who have backed us, thank you so much. Those of you who have not but are keeping an eyeball on us for launch, that's awesome. Thank you as well. We will pick it up again in a month. Thanks for coming in, and we will see you in game and hopefully see you soon in HungerDome as well.
Thanks, everybody, for coming out.
Cool.
Bye,
all right.
Everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.